Hello and welcome to Emotion Regulation 6. So today's plan. We're going to have a look at teeny tiny recap after the mindfulness exercise, and then we're going to look at Emotional Regulation 6. This is the last of the emotional regulation sessions for the emotion regulation module. So just before we start, I just want you to just scan your environment, see if there's anything that needs adjusting. Scan yourself, top of your head to the tips of your toes. See if there's anything you need to do to move, to sort of settle yourself. What can you do that's going to make you most likely to gain from watching this video today? And then what I want you to do is I want you to make sure you've got a piece of paper, pen, and we're going to be looking at handouts 21 to 25 today. So if you make sure you have those to hand, that'd be great. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a mindfulness exercise. And as usual, what we're looking at is trying to identify those little patterns, those little things that start interfering with our ability to focus on where we want our brain to be. So we're looking out for when those things happen. When do we get uninvited thoughts coming in? Does that make it easier or harder to do the mindfulness exercise? Are there judgments about the mindfulness exercise themselves? Are we noticing a sensation inside us that feels like a resistance, a wanting to move away from the exercise? Or are we thinking, oh good, we really like this, and we're noticing an urge to get stuck in? Whatever it is, there's no judgment or blame attached to that. This is all learning. Everything that we notice, everything we observe is things that will help us in our everyday life. And the more we understand about our brain and how it works and how it trips us up and how it hijacks us sometimes, the more we're able to do something about it. So this mindfulness is an observed mindfulness. And we're going to be observing our bodies, our breaths, the sensations that come up for us, the thoughts that may come into our head. We're just going to notice and observe. And we're going to focus our attention on radical acceptance. And it might be useful at this point to just pause the video and watch the Marsha Linehan link that I sent along with the link to this video. That gives a really good overview of what radical acceptance is and how Marsha herself learned radical acceptance. And in a nutshell, radical acceptance of the current moment does not mean it is right, and it doesn't mean that you can't act to change the future. It is about only radically accepting the moment that you're in. So it is the ability to let go of what you want and desire, to let go of having to have what you want, and radically accepting in that moment that reality is what it is. So for this exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on our in-breath and our out-breath. And when we take an in-breath, I'm going to say everything is. When you have an out-breath, it's as it is. So it's everything is as it is. You can say this in your head, you can say it out loud. There are no rules with that, though I'm sure you could create some. And we're going to do this for 2 minutes. So what did you notice? Let's pause the video and just jot a few things down. And then when you've done that, just allow yourself to just check out how your body's feeling. Does it need to move? Do I need to adjust myself? Do I need to adjust anything in my environment or my posture so that when I go on to the next slide, I can be fully engaged to take in as much information as possible? So last week we had a look at all the things that we could do that would help reduce our vulnerability to emotion mind, and how those things that we could do that would increase our resilience, our emotional resilience, and help us build like a bank of things that we can use when the resources are low, so accumulating lots of positive emotions. We also looked at how we could build mastery that would help reach our goals and cope ahead of time. So, how did you get on with your homework? Let's have a little pause, jot a few things down. What have you put in place to look after your body? What are you doing differently now because of the homework practice task? What positive events have you experimented with? And what will you do next week with these? Continue to build on them. And what are you doing to build mastery? I'm really curious to know what you've come up with. Which situations did you use cope ahead with? Again, have another pause. Just jot down the things that come into your mind about what it is you did this week. And then I've got an interesting top tip for you about boredom. So I got this information from somebody wise that I was talking to the other week who has experimented with this new technique. And basically what it is that when you're feeling that level of boredom where you sort of know there's nothing you'd really want to do, you don't know what it is you want to do, and at the same time you have no energy to really do anything, then what you're doing is you're employing what sounds like extreme opposite action. And what you do is you do something that you don't want to do, because the basis behind this is you're not really enjoying or finding anything satisfying anyway, so you might as well do something that's on your to-do list of things that you don't really want to do. I don't know, and there might be a long list of those. It might be handing in an assignment, writing an assignment, it might be putting the bins out, it might be doing some pots. It doesn't really matter what it is, but the idea is that when you start to do something that you don't want to do, then it sort of kickstarts your brain into thinking about things that you would prefer to be doing. So this is a win-win situation, because not only are you getting done the tasks that actually you don't enjoy doing anyway, but in doing those, your brain starts generating ideas about what it would be preferred to be doing. So you start being able to accumulate events in your mind that would generate more positive emotions. So I really like that. Have a play, see what you think. So this week we're going to be looking at managing really difficult emotions. So those times where you just literally feel on the floor with sadness, or where you feel you can want to completely explode with anger, or it feels uncontrollable. Perhaps there's times where you just feel completely frozen with fear, or where you feel so consumed by shame that you just want to crawl away and hide and never see anybody again. Those emotions are really difficult to deal with, aren't they? Those are times where our thinking stops, we become completely immersed in emotion mind. It's really hard to access anything to do with wise mind. So we need some extra skills to fall back on when those times happen. First thing we need to do is we need to have some techniques for managing extreme emotions, and we need to have some ways of troubleshooting emotion regulation skills. So sometimes we're trying skills and we're thinking they're not working. We need to find out why. And the other thing we need to learn is mindfulness of current emotions. So managing extreme emotions. Sometimes emotional arousal is so high that you feel like you just can't use any skills, particularly if the skills are complicated or you've got to think, because as we know with emotion, when it's really high, it stops us from thinking. It's really hard to access wise mind. And this is where coping ahead comes in really useful, because first of all, what you need to do is you need to identify what is your personal skills breakdown point. And to do that, it's easier when you're not in a crisis situation to think back on previous episodes where you just felt like you had hit a wall, where you felt like there was no way you could use any emotion regulation skills at all. So ask yourself, when you think back to those occasions, how distressed were you? At what level of distress were you at where you couldn't focus your mind on anything but the emotion, where you couldn't solve any problems or couldn't use any complicated skills at all? And then just check the facts. So, do you really fall apart at this level of arousal? If you don't, if you think no, that's not the point, just cast your mind back to a point where you think, actually, do you know what, this is it. Okay, because what we want to do here is we want to find clues about what is your personal skills breakdown point, because if you know what it is and you're prepared for it, there are things that you can put in place before you get there. And I want to emphasize here that this is a personal skills breakdown point. It is not you as a person breaking down. This is where your emotions become so enormous, so overwhelming that actually you're not able to think, you're not able to do anything. You feel as though you've just hit a wall. And when that level of distress is so extreme, it's really difficult to focus your mind on anything but the emotion. What we need to do at that point is we need to be able to bring our arousal level down as far as we can so that we start being able to use our emotion regulation skills. So we need to be able to make use of what we're feeling and at the very least not make things worse. So what we need for that is crisis survival skills. So what you need to do here is you need to go back to your distress tolerance skills. And we know that those distress tolerance skills start with stop. The stop and tip skills in particular are the ones that take the edge off. They take the edge off the intensity of the emotion that we're feeling. They allow us to start being able to access our wise mind. And that's hugely important because we want to be able to regulate this emotion. We want to be able to do something useful with it. So cast your mind back to the stop skills and the tip skills. And tip is standing for temperature. So this is, either, if you're feeling really sad, get your temperature, get warmed up. If you're feeling frozen with fear, warm yourself up. If you're feeling like you're going to explode with anger, it's cold water all the way. If you're feeling very anxious, cold water all the way. Anything cold, fan, ice packs, doesn't matter what it is, but get that temperature down. Intense exercise, none of us want to do it, but oh my goodness, it works. It releases some of that energy that's built up with that level of tension that we're carrying around us, particularly with fear and with anger. And then paced breathing. We do that a lot in mindfulness, don't we? It works. It sends that signal to our vagus nerve to just calm everything down in our body. And paired muscle relaxation. Sometimes you don't need to do the whole body. Sometimes you just need to shrug your shoulders up and then say, relax. Tense your fists and then relax. Just experiment now with doing a few of these movements to remind yourself of those tip skills. And the other crisis survival skills that we have at our fingertips, or even in our brains, are the improve the moment skills. Now you might think that when your emotions are really, really high, it's really hard to use those improve the moment skills, and it is difficult. But actually, even if you're only doing it for a few seconds, it takes that level of intensity down. Then we've got the self-soothing skills and our distract skills with Wise Mind Accepts. Just pause the video now and just go and have a look at those skills, just to refresh your memory on those distress tolerance skills that are about crisis survival, that are really perfect for moments like this where your emotions are so extreme that it's really difficult to manage anything other than the small list of skills. And the next step in managing very extreme emotions is mindfulness of current emotions. This is a way of letting go of the emotional suffering that we feel. And I really love this quote: "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf." So this is about being skillful, about being more effective. The emotions that we have are there for a purpose, and we've spent quite a lot of time in this module looking at what emotions do for us. We want to be able to use them. We want to be able to fully utilise them. We want to make sure that when we have extreme emotion, that it doesn't make life worse for us. There's some reasons why this is really, really important. One of the most interesting facts is around the research that's been done on emotions, which is about that actually it's if we expose ourselves to our emotions, it's a bit like it works on the same principle as exposure does in treating phobias and panic. We learn that they're not catastrophic. We learn to stop being so afraid of them, and once we are less afraid, the fear and the panic and the anger starts to go down, it starts to dissipate. It also means that in doing that, we feel more free. We feel more in control because we have got a way of feeling that we have got a way of managing our emotions. And all the research would suggest that actually suppressing our emotions over a long period of time is really quite damaging for us. So learning to surf those emotions is really important. That doesn't mean to say that it's easy. Because what you're being asked to do is you're being asked to observe your emotion. And that's quite difficult, isn't it? Sometimes it feels so overwhelming that you feel afraid to stay with it. But actually it follows a pattern. And that pattern means that it rises up, it reaches a peak, and then it starts to fall down again, because our bodies and our minds cannot hold on to one emotion for any length of time. So if you have a look at this diagram, we have a trigger for our emotion. It starts to increase, it peaks, and then it starts to fall down again. Now just be aware of this, because say for instance that you've had, I don't know, a conflict, an interpersonal conflict with somebody. Now what is likely to happen is you're going to ruminate on that. So you're going to feel that possible anger or that sadness or that guilt, that shame, and you will allow it to ramp up and peak, and it starts to fall, and just as it's starting to fall, another thought comes into your head of what you could have said, what you should have said, what you wish you hadn't said, and then you get that trigger again, and then up it goes again. So just be aware that when you're doing mindfulness of current emotions, just like waves can come, it's not normally one wave, it's normally a number of waves, and allowing yourself just to observe and go with that emotion as it is, to be curious about where that is in your body, gives you much more information about what's happening for you. And that mindfulness of body sensations links back to that body scan, doesn't it? Because if we can know where the sensation is, it gives us a clue as to what's happening for us. And if we can get some information about the emotions that we're feeling, we're better able to solve the problems that are facing us and be able to manage those emotions. And when you're doing this, it's really important to remember you are not your emotion. Emotions are there because you're a human being. You're feeling something entirely natural. It doesn't make you who you are. You have a right to feel. And this is always a difficult one, isn't it? So for having bared with me over loving kindness, I now want to go with loving your emotions, and I can almost hear your sighs of disbelief in the background. But actually what we're talking about is acceptance. We're talking about accepting our emotions as they are, without judgment and without blame. But this is the emotion that I'm having at the moment. Doesn't mean to say it says anything about me. It just means this is how I feel in this moment. So when we're practicing these, accepting our emotions and just allowing these emotions to go with us, what we notice is that the intensity of our emotion starts to lessen. When the intensity of our emotion starts to lessen, then we're more able to do something with it. What I would encourage you to do is practice this when your emotions are not at boiling point. So even as you sit here right now and you imagine something, maybe something mildly irritating, something that feels a bit manageable to deal with, as you bring that up into your mind right now, and you scan yourself from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, do you notice in your body what is the sensation? Allow yourself to just notice it. You're just going to observe that sensation. You're going to imagine that that sensation is washing through you as though it's a wave washing over you. If that doesn't feel right, maybe just imagine being on a beach and having that wave just gently washing over your feet and then just gently washing back. If water doesn't feel right for you, then maybe think about a wind or a breeze. Imagine the breeze just washing over you, as if that's the emotion. And you're just allowing it to ramp up, peak, and then fall again. Have a practice with it, have a play, have an experiment, be curious about what you're going to find. Now this is my all-time favourite. I know that I have said this, I have a lot of all-time favourites, but troubleshooting, I absolutely love troubleshooting. It's like being your own personal detective. Now I have found this unbelievably cute picture of Pikachu, who, would you believe it, is now there's now a film on Pikachu the Detective. However, I digress. Troubleshooting is a bit like being your own detective. The key is to be curious, to stay away from assumptions, to stay away from judgments, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to work out, okay, what is happening here? What isn't working and why? What can I do about it? Because there will be a reason. It's just about finding it, and once you've found it, then you feel really quite pleased that you've identified what it is and you can do something about it. So sometimes we have times where you just think, do you know that these skills are just not working? Then I've tried everything. So there's something going wrong somewhere. So this is where you need your own image of a detective in your head. How can I channel that part of me that's a curious detective, wanting to understand about what is actually happening here? And what we're looking at here is, to use this, we're looking at Emotional Regulation Handout 24, and it's accompanied by Worksheet 16. And both of these are really excellent, and if you follow the instructions and go down there, it really makes your detective work an awful lot easier. And the first one won't come as any surprise to hear, is check your biological sensitivity. This is your please skills. When our bodies are not right, when our bodies are not functioning as they should, when we're not putting into our bodies what our bodies need in order to fuel up and work effectively, when we're not moving our bodies in the way they need to be moved, when we're not paying attention to physical illnesses, to our sleep, all of those areas of our physical health affect us. So sometimes we're feeling really low and sad because we're not well. And sometimes we're feeling really fed up and sad because we've just had a bout of illness and we've really not looked after ourselves very well, and we're feeling a bit flat and lethargic. And in those sort of cases, it's worth just acknowledging, this is what I've been through and this is the effect I've had, rather than beating yourself up for not being able to do something that you'd normally be able to do. Check your skills. Sometimes we say we've tried really hard at something and we've put everything in place, and actually what we've done is tried really hard at something that we've actually read wrong. So sometimes when we're reading things, we might have missed an important part of that skill, or we might have misread something, or we might have made an assumption about what that skill is and then gone with that rather than checking out, is that actually the skill? Is that really what I should be doing? So check your skills, have a look at what you've tried. Is the skill that you're trying the right skill for this situation? Get your folder out, have a look through the skills, see what you can find in there. Check for reinforcers. This is a really important one. Do you remember when we were talking about shaping behaviour? How our emotions shape other people's behaviour, how they influence other people, what they communicate to other people. Is what's happening now something that reoccurs? Is what's happening now a pattern for you? In which case you might be getting something out of it. Your brain might be thinking, actually this works so far, because it's not really seeing the bigger picture. If that is the case, just jot down what's happening right now. Think about, okay, so this has happened before. What's the usual pattern with this? Where can I interrupt the cycle? Where can I learn from this? Have a think about what could motivate me to do things that I think are important. What might validate my beliefs or my identity? What might make me feel good in this moment? It's possible that actually what you're looking at here is something that needs some interpersonal skills. So checking out what you could do or how you could communicate in a different way might be really important. Or you might just be stuck with one of those horrible moments where you just think, do you know, I'm not doing this, I'm digging my heels in, I'm not doing it. In which case, pros and cons for changing emotions can be really important. Okay. Check your mood. Ask yourself, am I putting in the time and effort that solving my problem will take? It's a really good question. It's a hard one to ask ourselves, isn't it? Because certainly not one I like to answer, honestly. Because there's times if I'm feeling really low or fed up, that if somebody asks me if I'm putting in the time or effort that solving my problem will take, it just really makes me feel really annoyed. So then I would go into that sort of willful position. To do the pros and cons on working hard on skills. It takes effort to do this, but the rewards are huge. Practice radical acceptance and willingness skills. Just try willing hands, half smile. Does that change how you feel right now? Think about the mindfulness skills of participating in effectiveness. Ask yourself, am I being at my most effective right now? Is this working for me? Check for emotional overload. This is a really important one, isn't it? And that goes back to managing extreme emotions. It's really difficult to put emotion regulation skills in place when your emotions just feel like they are too extreme. You need to take the edge off that intensity. Ask yourself, can the problems I'm worrying about be easily solved now? If yes, great, do problem solving. Come up with as many options as you possibly can. Look at the pros and cons for each. If no, go back to mindfulness of current emotions. And if your emotions are too high for you to think straight, then you're going back to your stop and your tip skills. This is another really important area in which we've covered in the other emotional regulation session, which is emotional myths. Are they getting in the way? Remember this chap. The myths that we create are really firmly embedded a lot of the time, and sometimes we don't even know we've got them until something happens and we just feel stuck. We feel like we just can't move anywhere. These emotions are really high, we've tried everything, and actually it's really difficult to know whether we're going to be able to get anywhere with them. And sometimes what's blocking us, what's creating the problem, is a myth that we have about emotion. So just check the thoughts that are going through your head about what's actually happening at that time. Is it associated with a myth of emotion? Go back and reread those myths. See what's getting in the way. And so we come to the homework practice tasks for Emotion Regulation 6. So this is really quite marvellous, because these homework tasks that you're going to be practicing for this last emotion regulation session in this module are helping you on your way to achieving your goals, to achieving that life worth living. So these are hugely important and need to be celebrated. They are tools in your toolbox that you can pull out at any time and will help you throughout your life. So this week's homework practice tasks are to read through Handouts 21 to 25 and to complete Worksheets 15 and 16. So I hope you like this cheery little chappy. I thought it was really good. So what are you taking away with you from this session? And just allow yourself to pause a moment, jot a few things down. And what makes you smile? If you're coming up with the same thing each week, my challenge to you is to think of another 3 things that make you smile and add them to your list. Having a things that make me smile list can really help when you're wanting to improve the moment. Okay, so thank you for spending time with me on Emotion Regulation 6 and throughout the Emotion Regulation modules. We really would value your feedback. It helps inform the videos that we're making. Some things might be really useful for you. Some things might not make any sense at all. And others, you just think, oh, that might be better if it was done in a different way. We really would like to hear. All the feedback helps us. This is your training, and this is a way of getting much more out of it if you tell us what works and what doesn't. And it's also a way of trying out your interpersonal skills on us. So let us know. And in the meantime, happy experimenting and happy practicing.